Nittany Lion Roar with Extreme Panda here, and today's video is going to be about the psychology of randomness and how it relates to empires and puzzles. I did another video about avoiding silly mistakes, and I had mentioned in it that randomness is something that really messes with the human brain, and that I might do a video on this topic, and a lot of people really wanted to hear about it, so I went ahead and put this together for you. So this is really going to be a guide to understanding RNG, which is the random numbers generator that's used in a lot of games, and then how to avoid making a lot of the mistakes that players make because of how randomness affects the human brain, and then also to kind of teach you how to take advantage of the odds, basically bucking your nature as a human and thinking more along the line of statistics and probability. All right. So let me just start off with a little bit of an introduction. From an evolutionary perspective, human brains have developed an exceptional ability to spot patterns. So much so that that's pretty much all that we can comprehend. In our day-to-day lives, if you really start going through your day and thinking about the things that you think about, there's a term for that. It's called metacognition. Think about the things you're thinking about. A lot of it is just trying to spot patterns throughout your day. And the reason that our brains have developed that way, and we're exceptional at it, is because we are some of the best learners on the planet. That's how we learn. But I'll tell you what, there's not much in nature that's truly random, which is why we're so exceptional at that. We're always looking for patterns because it's how we get better at things. It's how we master manipulating our environment around us. And for thousands and thousands of years, we've been getting better and better at that, to the point where we just, through most of human history, have had no reason to really comprehend randomness. So when we do encounter things that are truly random, which most of our ancestors did not really have the opportunity to do, but we do now in this day and age, it really messes with our head. It plays tricks on people and makes them do some weird stuff, which is where we get gambling addiction and superstitions and things like that. Well, here's how randomness affects us as we play empires and puzzles. First, you got to understand what RNG is. RNG stands for random numbers generator. And what random numbers generator is basically, I'm not going to get too technical with it, but basically it's what's built into the software of these games you play on your phone and on the computer and things like that. Whenever anything random happens in the game, or there's a percent chance of something happening, there's basically an engine that is creating the likelihood of something appearing at some percent. That's the random numbers generator. So you're going to hear people talking about RNG, and that's what they mean, is something appearing randomly at some certain percent. So where do you see this in empires and puzzles? It does determine your tile appearances. There's a certain percent chance that a colored tile is going to appear. It's pretty easy to calculate because there are 5 colors and there's only a certain number of tiles on each screen. So the likelihood that a color is going to show up is how many tiles there are divided by the number of colors there are. It also determines specials. So for example, like Wukong is a great example because he has a 32% chance to miss and cause your allies to miss. And so when an individual tile who's affected by Wukong's special hits an opponent, that tile's either going to hit or it's not, and it's determined by random numbers generator. It's about 32%, so that means that most of the time it's probably going to hit, but about a third of the time it's not. This also affects summons, of course, and you can see the picture I have below here. They actually give us the appearance rates. So what I have listed up here was for the Christmas event, and you can see that rare classic heroes show up at 64%. Epic classic heroes show up at 23.3%. Legendary classic hero at 0.9%. So even legendary classic heroes are really not likely to show up. Let's go even further down. Even lower is the chance to get a legendary seasonal hero at 0.6%. Okay, so every time you make an individual summon, you have a 0.6% chance of getting a legendary seasonal hero. What that really means is you have to do about 200 summons to expect to maybe get one hero, a legendary seasonal hero. That would have been Santa or Mother North. And then lastly, the bonus draw, which is always the same. Legendary hero of the month is 1.3%. So you're more likely to get the hero of the month than the legendary seasonal hero. So that's how RNG affects summons. And then lastly, we have loot. Now, this isn't, of course, the last thing in the game. There are more examples of RNG, but this is where you see it most of the time. So, of course, whenever you go to open a chest and or kill a Titan and get loot from the Titan, what you actually get is random. And it's based on some percent that you're going to get something. So this is when you see RNG appear in the game. And you personally do not have any control over the RNG. The RNG is going to do what the RNG is going to do, and you're going to get what you get. And over a long period of time, it's going to match the percentages. Over a short period of time, it may not match the percentages, and that's what our brain has a really hard time with. Now that I've spent some time talking about what RNG and the random numbers generator is, I want to spend some time just talking a little bit about the human brain. So first of all, we have some evolutionary strengths. And the first one is problem solving. We became alpha predators on this planet because of our problem solving. We are the species that has taken over the world because of this strength. We are probably the best problem solvers of all the living beings out there. Also, our brains are really elastic, which means that we're all pretty flexible and able to learn and take in new information and retain it, and then not only that, but use it in useful ways. And also the human brain is really good at observing patterns. We've had to do this because if you think about the human body, it's really not that exceptional. There's lions out there and cheetahs and sharks and elephants and, all these animals out there that are just really powerful. And so we've had to be really good at problem solving, learning, and observing patterns in order to survive as a species. Some evolutionary weaknesses, though, that come with this are that, for one, our negative emotions cause our attention to narrow and miss the bigger picture. This one, it actually can be a strength too. Let me frame it as a strength first, and then I'll tell you how it's a weakness. So as a strength, whenever we're feeling really badly, it makes us focus on a problem, whatever is making us feel that way. And that causes our attention to kind of like hyper-focus on the problem. The reason being because we then want to use the rest of our strengths, our problem solving, our elasticity, and our ability to observe patterns to solve that problem. So feeling negative emotions is not always bad, but in playing this game, what tends to happen is that if you start to feel bad, you get a bad board, or you make a mistake or something like that, you get so hyper-focused on the problem. Let me give you the example of a bad board. You get so focused on the problem of there being a bad board that your attention narrows and you miss the bigger picture. So now you start focusing on your strong color of tiles and making those matches. But what's happening is if you just get focused on your colored tiles and start making those matches, you're depleting them and then missing other colors on the board where you could make diamonds or make better moves that cause cascades and things like that. The next thing is that we just really can't process true randomness. So when we do encounter randomness in the world, our brain has a real problem with that and actually causes weird things to happen. I'm going to talk about some of those weird things today. And then lastly, again, this is one that could be framed as a strength in some ways, but it tends to be a weakness whenever you're playing a game like Empires and Puzzles, and that's folk intuition. So to frame it as a strength first, before this day and age, all of our ancestors couldn't rely on computers and calculators and things like that. And so our brains and our bodies really had to depend on a gut feeling based on the information we've taken in. We're observing patterns, and so our brain tries to calculate how to use that information and make the best guess it possibly can on what to do with that information. That's folk intuition, is, just a gut feel. The problem with folk intuition, and this is where it's a weakness in a game like this, is it is just a guess. It's a best guess. It's not often right or exactly right. And in fact, when folk intuition is wrong, then somebody can really get set in their way of doing something wrong for a long, long time, not realizing that they're doing something wrong. So we want to avoid folk intuition or making best guesses at things. We want to know for sure that what we're doing or what we're seeing or what we're observing is exactly right. Okay, so up to this point, I've been talking just a little bit about what RNG is and how the human brain works. But the rest of this video is probably going to rile some people up, and that is because of folk intuition. I'm going to talk about some really kind of weird things that happen whenever your brain has to try and cope with randomness. But it's going to be a little bit controversial, and that is because people have built up folk intuition as they've been playing this game, and their randomness is so powerful on the brain and has such a strong effect on folk intuition that people swear they see patterns whenever patterns don't exist, to the point that I'm probably going to talk about some things in the game that are pretty simple and just based on numbers, and people are probably going to come into the comments and fight me on it, and that's okay. I can handle it, but I'm just gonna talk strictly what we know from psychological research and about randomness and probability and statistics. So folk intuition, it's how our brain tries to cope with our lack of a probability network. Although our brains are really good at seeing patterns and making best guesses, which is what folk intuition is, our brains are still not calculators and computers, and so we are not exact. And so we develop folk intuition as sort of our makeshift calculator. It's not always right or exact. And an example of this is the Monty Hall problem, which through all of human history and our ability to do math, the Monty Hall problem is something that we only recently discovered is something that has a strange effect on our brain. I'm going to give you an example of this, although I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can look this up on the internet if you'd like to. I want you to imagine, and this is what the Monty Hall problem is. I want you to imagine you're on a game show, and behind one of 3 doors is a car, a brand new car. And if you open the correct door, you get the car. All right. So doors number 1, 2, and 3. And let's say you pick door number 1. So the game show host says he's going to open either door number 2 or door number 3 and reveal whether there's a car behind it or not. So the game show host opens door number 3 and there is no car behind it, meaning the car may be behind yours or it may be behind a door number 2. Now, the game show host asks you, do you want to change your answer or not? Do you want to pick door number 2 instead, or do you want to stick with door number 1? Now, I know what you're probably thinking right now is, well, there's a 50-50 chance of it being behind door number 1 or door number 2. It doesn't really matter. I might as well just stick with door number 1. Or I could change to door number 2, but it really doesn't matter. However, that is our folk intuition at work. There is a correct answer to this problem. The correct answer is change to door number 2. And the reason is because when you picked door number 1, you had a 33% chance to be correct, a 1 in 3 chance. But whenever the game show host revealed that there was nothing behind door number 3, the game show host all of a sudden turned door number 2 into a 50% chance. Your door number 1 is still a 33% chance. Door number 2 is a 50% chance. The correct answer is to change to door number 2. Now, our brains have such a problem with this because even if you do make the right choice and pick door number 2, You could still be wrong. The car could be behind door number one, but it's more likely to be behind door number two. Now, I know you're probably having a difficulty wrapping your brain around this, so I'm not going to spend time. You can pause the video if you want and go look this Monty Hall problem up on the internet. It's really fascinating, but this is just an example of how our brain has such a problem with probability and randomness. But I'm going to move on. Another way that randomness messes with our brains is the law of small numbers. And this is the incorrect belief that a small sample is representative of a larger population. So when random things are happening in the game, this is where we take one instance of something happening or just a couple instances of something and apply it to our broader understanding of the game. An example of this might be like one Titan hit with Wukong, and oh my gosh, Wukong made me miss everything. Therefore, I think that Wukong's card is wrong. Or another example of like one bad war. I went in and all my boards were bad. Therefore, Empires and Puzzles gives me worse boards than other people. The problem is that, I had mentioned before about how negative emotions narrow our focus. And we get so much more focused on bad things happening and how that makes us feel than positive things. So we tend to notice those small sample sizes more and then make it more representative to the larger population of things happening. So this is when you hear people complaining about their bad boards and Wukong and their summons and things like that. Because they're just so much more focused on how bad it feels for that to happen, and they're applying it to how the broader game is played. They're not really noticing the times that good things happen to them as well. So how to take advantage of the law of small numbers is don't sweat some bad boards or poor summons. Don't get flustered. Just realize it's statistics, it's numbers. It's not personal. The game's not out to get you. Small Giants didn't program their game just to annoy you or just to frustrate you. If you start to get flustered, you're going to start making mistakes. Like I said, you're not able to see the bigger picture, so then you start focusing on the problems of the game, and then you're focusing on the wrong thing, and then you're not actually controlling the things that you can control. You're so stuck on the things that you can't control. Also, don't start doing weird stuff whenever you make a good pool or get an exceptionally good board. I see people doing this as well. They start to think that they had some control over that good board or good pool, and then they start doing strange things. Like one example of this might be, I have a personal belief in this game that 3-2 is a really strong attack team where you have 3 of one color, usually the strong color against the tank, and 2 that are probably good against the flank. But somebody may have one time gone in with a rainbow attack team out of frustration and it worked. So, law of small numbers, it was one time that worked. So, the board must be better whenever you go in with a rainbow team. And then they generalize that to the whole game. Please realize this is just odds. It's not personal. You didn't do anything to make the good board happen. It just was what it was. I do believe that you have control over some things in the game. For example, the matches you make and the odds of the next tile appearing. That's where you really do have control. So let's talk about regression to the mean. A string of good summons doesn't mean you're lucky, and a string of bad summons doesn't mean you're unlucky. Either extreme is going to mean that future pools are going to be closer to average. And this is really how you take advantage of it with a board, where you do have control over the matches you make. So you could go in, if you're really frustrated, and make the 2 matches of the colors that you brought that exist, just because that's what you're focused on. And then, of course, you only have a 1 in 5 chance of each individual tile coming in being the color that you need, so you've depleted your tiles. Or you take advantage of the odds, and you go in and perhaps make matches of not your colors, so that the tiles that come in with that 1 in 5 chance are more likely to make matches with the colors you do want. What regression of the mean is Over a long period of time, you're going to see that the 1 in 5 chance of a tile appearing is going to be pretty standard. Over 1 or 2 boards, you could have a lot of that color, or you could have a little bit of that color, but over the long run, the regression to the mean means it's going to be exactly what the percentage chance is. This means that the summons that you're pulling as well, with those numbers I showed you at the beginning of this video, if you do 1,000 summons, you're going to be pretty close to those numbers. If you do a single 10 pull, probably not. You're probably going to be to one extreme or the other, and this is where you hear people say, I did a 10 pull and I only got rare heroes. Or, oh my gosh, I got 3 5-star heroes and 1 10 pull. All right? Those are extremes, and what that means is that future summons are probably going to regress to the mean, meaning the next 10 pull you do probably won't have all 3 stars. You'll probably at least get a couple of 4 stars in there too, maybe even a 5-star. What that also means for the person who pulled 3 5-stars, which has certainly happened to me before, it means that the next 10 pulls probably not going to be that good. Again, how you relate this to the boards is, if you start out with a bad board, they're probably not all going to be that way. The next time you fight a match, you'll probably have a little bit better of a board. What that also means within the match is that if you start with a bad board and you use the odds to your advantage, making matches to create diamonds or cascades in the smartest way possible, that means that the next tiles that appear will probably be better than the opening board. That's how you can take advantage of this and something you do have control over. I've been talking a lot about control, what you have control over, what you don't have control over. You don't really have control over RNG, but you do have control over the matches that you make or how many summons you do and things like that. You have control over how much you're leveling your heroes or which maps that you're farming and things like that. So this brings me to locus of control, or basically location of control. Where is your control? Is it within you or is it outside of you? Locus of control is how much you believe you have control over things. And the first idea is the external locus of control. So the external locus of control, or people who have an external locus of control, generally believe that their successes or failures in life, not just with this game, but in life, result from external factors beyond their control, such as luck, fate, circumstances, injustice, bias, or others who are unfair, prejudiced, or unskilled. Within the game, this is believing that everything is luck. Your opening board is luck. Your summons are just total luck, that there's nothing that you can do. You just are basically rolling a dice. But an internal locus of control, on the other hand, are people who don't focus on those things I just mentioned, but do focus on the things that they can control. They believe that their hard work or their personal strengths or qualities are going to lead to success. They believe that they can manipulate the board in a certain way that doesn't guarantee a win, but will be more likely to get them a win. They review videos to see if they're making mistakes, or they ask others for advice, or they think carefully about which heroes they're leveling or which ones they're putting emblems on. They think about which specials work together well. They don't just write things off as luck. They understand that randomness and probability is part of the game, but they do believe they have control over certain things, and what they have control over are things they can actually control. So how do you take advantage of this? Simply control what you can control. It's the matches you make on the board. Play the odds that I've been talking about, the 1 in 5 chance that the next tile is going to come up. If you go into a match and right off the bat with your opening board, just start making matches of your color, you're going to lose a lot of games because you're just wasting those away with only a 1 in 5 chance of getting those colors to come back. You really want to go into a match getting rid of bad tiles first, so that your 1 in 5 chance means that you're going to get your colors showing up and it's going to be able to match with the colors that already existed on the board. This includes with how you spend your money. if you spend any money on this game, if you go to do summons, and you know that there's only like a 1.3% chance you're going to get the hero that you want, well, that means you're probably going to have to do close to 100 summons to maybe get that hero, and it's not even a guarantee. So if you have an external locus of control and you do 100 summons and you don't get the hero that you want, you're going to get extremely frustrated and upset and think that the game hates you and SG's out to get you and your money. But people with an internal locus of control set a budget. They know I have a certain amount of money I want to spend on this game. I'm not going to spend more than it. I know there's a certain probability I'm going to get the hero I want, but if I don't, then oh well. I spent the money that I was willing to spend and I'm not spending any more than that. And so this is a lot of where gamblers' addiction comes in. And so people who tend to have an external locus of control tend to get suckered into the lucky part of it, and will just roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and roll until they get what they want, or what they need or what they think should happen. And then because they get rewarded for that eventually, it just makes them more likely to keep doing that. Whereas people with an internal locus of control are just going to understand the odds. They're not going to waste their money whenever it's not necessary. They're just going to be efficient, and they're going to deal with what the game gives them. Another sort of strange effect that randomness has on the human brain is superstitious behavior. So this is another way that we cope with not really understanding randomness. So from the University of Iowa, the Department of Psychology and Brain Sciences, they say that superstitious behavior arises when the delivery of a reinforcer or punisher occurs close together in time. This is temporal contiguity, with an independent behavior. Therefore, the behavior is accidentally reinforced or punished, increasing the likelihood of that behavior occurring again. Let me break this down for you. So first, let me describe how learning typically takes place, because when we're talking about reinforcers or punishers, we're talking about learning. A really basic example of this is if you're training your dog to sit. When you say sit, if the dog sits, you give the dog a treat. That's a reward, and it's reinforcing that behavior. Reinforcers are all about increasing a behavior you want to see. So you want to see your dog sit more when you say sit, so you give the dog a reward. However, you don't want the dog peeing on your floor, so you squirt the dog in the face with some water when the dog pees on the floor, because you want to see less of that behavior. That's basically how reinforcers and punishers work. The thing with most of learning in the world and through time and history and human ancestry is that since there hasn't been so much randomness, we're really good learners. When we get reinforced, when we do something good, something that helps us or makes us feel good, we're more likely to do it. And if something hurts or we don't like it, we're less likely to do it. But there's patterns to it in the real world and in nature. So we're, let me think of an example. You find a creek of running water. If you're one of our human ancestors, you find a creek of running water and you drink it and it makes you feel hydrated and good. Then that's rewarding. You're going to go back to that creek and drink the water. If you go to a sludge-filled pond and drink the water and get sick, that's punishing, and you're less likely to go to that nasty pond and drink the water. That's a pattern. And so it's not random. There's reasons for why those things work the way they do. But with randomness, it makes us see patterns where there aren't actually patterns. So whenever something random actually happens, and that's what it's called with here in the superstitious behavior, something random happens that coincides with an independent behavior, and it's either reinforcing or punishing, then we start to develop superstitious behaviors. So an example of this is like, sports superstitions are a lot of people have these. This is like, I'm wearing my lucky hat to the football game because one time when I wore the hat, the team won this big game they weren't supposed to win. So, of course, I have to wear this hat every time. If I don't wear the hat, the team's not going to win. All right? So, the outcome of that game is probably not truly random, but that's an example of where sports superstitions come from. And The thing is that, if you're a sports fan, you didn't actually control the outcome of the win. You had nothing to do with whether the team won or not, but you associate that with you wearing the hat. So therefore, that was reinforcing you're more likely to wear the hat. Again, reinforcing is likely to increase a behavior. A punishment is going to decrease a behavior. So in the game, an example of this might be like I've heard a lot of people actually say that they're more likely to get the hero of the month if they do individual summons rather than 10 pulls, which is just absolutely ludicrous because you can look at the numbers and see that the percent is the same no matter what, no matter how you do it. But somebody used an individual pool one time and got the hero of the month, and so they think this is the reinforcer. I did an individual pool, therefore I'm more likely to get the hero of the month. So they were reinforced for doing that, and then they're more likely to do that. That's a superstitious behavior. This can also work with punishments too, but it's more typical, I think, of reinforcers. Reinforcers are stronger than punishments. But an example could be like I went in with my 3-2 team, where the 3 was the strong color against the tank and the 2 was strong against the flank, and my team got destroyed. So then I went in with a rainbow team where all the colors were different and I won. That's an example of both a reinforcer and a punisher creating a superstitious behavior. Therefore, now I'm going to always go in with a rainbow team. And it's such a strong thing that even whenever there's evidence to the contrary, losses with the rainbow team, for example, it still might not change that person's mind because the superstitious behavior stuck with them. I don't know what superstitious behaviors you've developed, but I bet you, I would almost guarantee a majority of Empires and Puzzles players have some kind of superstitious behavior that they do with the game. I'll even give a personal example. I know that I know this is a superstitious behavior. I even know all about this, and it's still something I do, is when I go to open a chest or get a Titan, I don't like to look at the rewards until after I get them, because, sometimes I feel like if I don't watch, then I'll get one of the 4-star mats, for example. Because one time when I clicked the chest and wasn't able to look at it and I heard the 4-star mat show up and then I looked at it and I had a 4-star mat, that became a reinforcer. So, I don't do that all the time, but when I'm getting really frustrated with the game, that superstitious tendency tends to sneak in for me personally. So I bet you have some superstitions too. And I know it's stupid, and I know that I can watch the freaking reward and it doesn't matter at all. But yet, this is why randomness is so strong that even with me, I know what effect it's having on me and I still do it. It's just crazy. But that's how these games make their money. These games understand how randomness affects our brain, and they take advantage of that. Another thing I want you to consider whenever you're thinking about how randomness is affecting us is that negative emotions are more salient than positive emotions. I've mentioned this a little bit previously in this video, but whenever bad things happen to you in this game, you're going to notice that more than you're going to notice the positive things. And that's one of the things that's causing you to develop some of these sort of weird habits or to notice the sort of effect this is having on people as far as the locus of control, having external locus of control or internal locus of control, right? So when people feel bad because they had a bad summons or a bad war or a bad Titan hit, they're so much more focused on that than when they had a good Titan hit or they had a really good war. And, oftentimes thinking that when they had a good war, well, it should be that way. That's the way it's supposed to be, rather than actually feeling good about it. So please know that, this is why people complain a lot. And I don't think that complaining is helpful. In fact, I think it makes everybody feel bad, because there's another psychological term called emotional contagion. That's whenever you spread your negative emotions to other people. So I really try to encourage my alliance and people I come in contact with not to complain, not to get really upset, not to vent in the chat, because they're going to spread their negative emotions to other people. And when you spread your negative emotions to other people, remember, I had said before that when you feel negative emotions, it narrows your attention onto the problem and you're unable to see the bigger picture. So now, not only are you feeling bad about how you're doing, but you're making other people feel bad whenever you spread negativity. And since they're feeling bad, they're now more likely to perform poorly and not be able to see the bigger picture. So understand this about yourself. You're going to notice the bad things more than the good things. But when that happens, you got to just kind of suck it up and be like, okay, you know what? There's randomness in this game, and I'm not going to let it get to me. I know there's probably going to be a regression to the mean, meaning that it's not always going to be this way. There are going to be good boards. There are going to be good moments in this game. And so I'm just going to move on from this and hope for the better board next time. And you know what? The next board may suck too. But a regression to the mean means that over the long run, you're more likely to experience the averages in the game. So it's not always going to be bad, but you are going to notice the bad more than you're going to notice the good. Another psychological phenomenon I want you to understand is the self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is simply where a belief comes true because of the belief. So for example, I can win this match because I have control over the tile matches I make. Or I never get any 5-star heroes, so it's not worth summoning. This is not referring to magical thinking. Magical thinking is, if I believe hard enough the next summon will be a 5-star hero, it will be. That's not what I'm talking about here. If you think about the two examples I just gave before that, I can win this match because I have control over the tile matches I make. That is optimistic. That's hopeful. That's positive. That makes you feel better. And so because it's a more positive feeling, you're more likely to see the bigger picture. You're more likely to see the diamond match. You're more likely to see the cascades that you can make. You're more likely to make the good decisions you know are good decisions rather than making a decision based on a bad emotion. But if you're saying to yourself, I never get good boards, or I never get 5-star heroes, so it's not worth summoning, then what's going to happen is you're feeling bad, so you're not seeing the bigger picture, so you're making worse decisions. Magical thinking is something that's totally different. It's not just you believe something, so it's going to come true if you believe it hard enough. So I do want to make that clear. But a self-fulfilling prophecy is kind of what your attitude is about this game, how you approach this game, means that your outcomes are more likely going to probably match that, because you're more likely to do the things that align with that. If you have more of a positive, more of an internal locus of control, then you're going to spend your time, energy, and effort in this game doing the things that lead to that. But if you have an external locus of control, which leads to a lot of thoughts about things not being in your control, or luck, or people are out to get you, or the Small Giant Games is out to get you, and things like that, you're going to do things that align more with that line of thinking, and it's going to lead you to have a worse time. So that's what a self-fulfilling prophecy is, and it's another effect that randomness has on you. If you can avoid your human nature and avoid some of the things that I'm talking about are pitfalls of randomness and its effect on you, and just step away from that and understand probabilities and what's happening in the game, then you're more likely to get a self-fulfilling prophecy in the direction that you want it to be in a more positive direction. And now I have some tips for you to avoid folk intuition and take advantage of RNG. These tips are all internal locus of control things. So if you can focus on these things and avoid all the pitfalls that I've talked about, you're going to be more successful with this game, and you're going to have more fun doing it too. So first, when making tile matches, slow down and control what you can. Don't get all flustered and go in there and start making matches of your colors and deplete your board. Slow down, look for the diamonds, look for the cascades, look for the hero specials that you can use on certain other heroes to give yourself an advantage. Next, have a growth mindset. rather than a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is, I'm not doing a good job at this yet. What can I do better? It's asking people for advice. It's recording your hits and watching them to see if you're making mistakes. It's doing things to try and improve. A fixed mindset is, I'll never be good at this, or the game is only luck, so there's nothing I can do anyway. Avoid the fixed mindset and have a growth mindset. Next, patience is needed to outlast RNG. You know what? I have totally fought in raids where I have gotten wrecked on offense. A lot of times it's mistakes I'm making. Sometimes it is just bad boards. That's what RNG is. Sometimes the RNG is just not going to give me what I need. But if you are patient and you can just step back and say, you know what, that's just how RNG works. I know that there will be a regression to the mean. It's going to be okay. Then you're going to have a lot more fun with this game. Please note that superstitious behavior isn't helping. I gave you a personal example of my own superstitious behavior. You know what? Whether I look at the chest when I open it or not, it's not actually affecting what loot I get. You have probably some kind of superstitious behavior with the game too. I bet a majority of people do. If you don't, that's amazing. But superstitious behavior isn't helping you. So, in fact, it might even be hurting you. If you're doing things like doing one summon at a time, you're spending a lot more money and a lot more gems on heroes than you have to, which means your roster over the long run is going to be worse than if you just did 10 pulls. Also, if you're attacking with rainbow teams, you're making your offense a lot slower than it needs to be. If a superstitious behavior is causing that, it's not helping, it's actually hurting you. So avoid superstitious behaviors. When you've had a bad run, know that it's not always this way. Again, this is referring to the regression to the mean. There will be better boards ahead, there will be better summons, there will be better Titan hits ahead if you've had a bad one. So the next one is, think you know something works? Test it against the data. And this is because folk intuition is telling you that something must be some way. It's trying to make a pattern where there might not be a pattern. There might be a pattern, but there might not be a pattern. So if you're getting a gut feeling about something, actually go collect some data on it and see if it's the truth. One example of this is back in the day, it was probably a couple years ago by now, there were a lot of people saying that Wukong was flawed, that he was actually missing a lot more than his card said. So I went and recorded a bunch of videos with Wukong, and it did feel to me like Wukong was missing more than he actually was. That was my gut feeling or my folk intuition. But then when I actually went and analyzed my videos, I found that Wukong was actually missing at just exactly the same rate that it says on the card. And so my folk intuition was wrong. If you have an idea that you swear something works the way it does, don't just rely on your gut feeling about it. Actually collect some data and test it out. Also, don't make generalizations about small numbers of instances. This is probably one of the most obvious and one of the biggest pitfalls I see people making all the time. And this is where I see people in the Empires and Puzzles community even just fighting a lot about swearing that something is the way it is when it's not really. And two people get in an argument because one person had a small instance where something went one way and another person had a small instance where it went another way, and they both swear and make generalizations about it that they're right because they experienced it. So don't do that, because that's leading you to make poor decisions as well. Next tip, let go of things that you can't control. You're just going to get really frustrated if you spend your time, energy, and effort so fixated on not getting the summon that you wanted or not getting a good board or things like that. Just focus on the things you can control, the matches you do make, your budget, the battle items that you take into a Titan hit, things like that. Next up, if you're flustered, walk away. Remember, I said that negative emotions are more salient, and when you're feeling negative emotions, your attention narrows to focus on the problem rather than the solution. And you might just need to, like, let's say the war is going bad, just put the phone down, go away, go do something fun for a little bit, come back, try the next hit. Make sure you're feeling a little bit better whenever you go to play. Next up, stop complaining. First of all, nobody wants to hear you complain. Secondly, you're making how you feel worse. And since negative emotions are more salient and tend to cause problems, you're just causing more problems for yourself. But secondly, because of emotional contagion or spreading your emotions like a disease, that you're spreading negative emotions to other people and causing them to feel bad too, and then they play more poorly. I see this in war. Somebody goes in and has a few bad hits, and then they fill the chat with just complaining and this is all luck and this is so stupid and blah, blah, blah. Then everybody in the chat who's watching is thinking, oh my gosh, this war must be going horribly. And there's nothing I have control over now when I go in, and I'm probably going to mess up too. And, when people start thinking like that, it creates a cascade of people doing poorly. So please stop complaining. And lastly, believe in yourself and your ability to problem solve. This is an internal locus of control. You do have the ability to get better at this game. I have seen free-to-play players play in some of the top alliances in this game, and they didn't do that without looking at ways that they could improve themselves. They get on Discord or online, and they chat with people and ask questions and problem solve and really take in advice. This is the elasticity part of our strengths as humans as well. I was talking about how the human brain is really good at learning. So take advantage of that and learn what you can. All right, well, this was a relatively long video. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that it helps you. Certainly feel free to make comments. I'm sure this is going to be a controversial video. I'm sure there are people who are so set in how randomness has affected them already that they're not going to even be able to comprehend the things I'm talking about here. I know, I get it. That's okay. That's fine. Feel free to debate it or talk about it in the comments. I'm totally open to it. I'd like to hear what you have to say.